For the topic of love, I think our world of entertainment would be highly confused as what to do. Because if you listen to very many songs, you would see very quickly that most of them have a common theme. And it's the idea that they want to present of how they feel love is presented. All the country songs are that way. Whatever different genre of music, almost every single song has some reference, or that is the premise of most of those songs. And it's the same way with our TV shows, with the movies that we watch. There's usually some sort of a romantic storyline to everything. And the reason is because when you break it down, everyone wants to be loved by someone, whether that be their family, whether that be someone else. It's something that people want. And that's because God has created that. It's a good thing. He's created that and has instilled that within man. But notice how important love is. I'd like you to read with me what 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 1 says. It says, "Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, have become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal." We were given the topic a few weeks ago to answer the question, well, what is love according to what the Bible says? You look at the world and what they will present it as. We'll get into some of that later on this evening. We see how they want to push it, what they say about it, how they'll describe it. But what's more important, what the world says or what God says? And that's what we want to answer tonight. What does God say?
In this verse 1 you just read, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am become sounding brass and a clanging cymbal. What that's saying is I'm hypocritical.
And I think another verse that would really back that up would be Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15, where it says, and it's a command to speak the truth in love. Love is a motivating factor in the life of a Christian, even the work that a Christian is supposed to do in spreading the gospel. If we don't have love, all we are doing in our worship, all we're doing in our efforts to reach out with the gospel is we're just making noise, essentially. So we see how important it is even in that area. What about this biblical picture of love?
Well, the biblical picture of love, I think we can read 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 through 8, and it pretty well gives you a good definition of it. Let's look at 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 8. Love suffers long and is kind. Now that right there says a whole lot. And I can tell you with raising children and being married that is true. Love suffers long and is kind. And also, I got to say, my wife has been very loving, very kind, but it does not envy, does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own. And that right there, it doesn't seek its own. It seeks the better for the other, for the wife, for the children, for the fellow man. It seeks the best. Is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. Bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Love never fails, but whether there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. And whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. That is a pretty good description of love. Love is giving up self and serving somebody else.
And you can see that that's a command in many places in the scripture. There in Philippians chapter 2, those first 4 verses speak of the mindset and the attitude that we're supposed to have toward our brethren and even toward the world. And we can see that it would come back to this very principle that we're looking at, a concept of what God paints the picture. Here's Paul's writing through inspiration of the Holy Spirit of what this should look like. But what about the different forms of love? There are different ways that love has been presented in the original language. There are 3 different ways that you see in the scriptures. In the Koine Greek, that is what the New Testament was written in. There are 4 different ways it is presented. And probably the most common of all of these, of those 3 that you're going to see in the New Testament scriptures, would be the concept of agape love. And that is just simply the sacrificial love that is willing to do something for someone else. Take example there in the book of Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 through 11. You see what he was willing to do. That is his example of sacrifice. And he did it because of what we see in Romans chapter 5, verses 8 and following, where you see that God demonstrated his love towards us in sending Christ for us. That's the example of a sacrificial love. That's probably the most common that you will see in the scriptures.
Another one is phileo love. That is brotherly love, and that could be a physical brother or it could be a Christian brother. The city of Philadelphia was named after that. That's why it's called the city of brotherly love. Well, I know it doesn't demonstrate it very well right now, but what that is we're looking out for the betterment of other people,
Right.
for their well-being.
And then thirdly, you would probably find the combination, I think it's in combination with the phileo love, is how that this is seen in the New Testament scriptures. You have what's known and classified as the storge, and we're probably not pronouncing these Greek words 100% accurate because it is a dead language.
Right.
No one really knows the exact way to pronounce these, but that is the concept of, as this one source put it, cherishing one's kindred, especially parents or children, fond of natural relatives. So think of that family relationship that a parent might have with a child. That's that idea that is there.
I want you to think of one, let's turn to Romans chapter 1 and look at verse, get here excited here. I think it's 31. And it's talking about, well, let's see, undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful. The King James, let me get to that because it says it in a way that I like better in this case. Romans chapter 1 and verse 31, I believe it is, or 30, yeah. Without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection. A mother, when she carries that baby for 9 months, she has a love for that baby before it ever gets here.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, as a father, I can say this too. I had love for that child too, even though I hadn't seen it. I felt it kick, and spent the 9 months with my wife, seeing her in that condition and the things she went through to carry that baby. But there's a love there that I don't know how people can get an abortion, because this fits it right here. A love that is without natural, the person is without natural affection. I don't understand, but that's off the point what we're talking about here. But cherishing one's kindred, and that you love your brother, you love your mother, your father, and there may be people that don't, but you got brothers and sisters and cousins and so on like that. And it's important that you love them. Another one is Eros love. This is the one form of love that is not really used in the New Testament Greek. Usually referenced in a relationship of a husband and a wife. But I got to say this about it: if the that kind of love is all you have for your spouse or it isn't going to work.
Right. And we'll get to that later on in our lesson this evening. But what about love? What is it? Well, we've seen some very basic definitions, but what does it look like? That's probably more important to consider when we want to answer the question, what is love? Well, what does it look like? There are three areas that we want to focus on tonight. Three different areas that we should be showing love toward. And the first of all, that first area is probably the most important. And actually, I would say there's no probably about it. It is the most important. And that is, what is true love towards God? In the book of 1 John chapter 4, down in verse 19, we find a reason for why we should want to love him. And we're going to back this up with several scriptures to come here in just a moment. But it says in the book of 1 John, chapter 4, verse 19, we love him because he first loved us. So we find there, right off the bat, so to speak, we see that we are supposed to have what toward God?
Love.
Love. And we can understand why we should want to love him. It's because he first loved us.
And we'll get a little deeper into that a little bit later on too.
Right.
You know, another thing, look at John 3:16. And what it says, for God so loved the world. Stop and think about that. He loved the world so much that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. But stop and think, here God loves us so much, he gave his only begotten Son to die on the cross. That is tremendous love.
Right. And another verse that will go right along with that is found in Romans chapter 5. Down in verse 8, it begins, actually, beginning in verse 6, I think it's interesting to read the context in this passage. For when we were still without strength, in due time Christ died for the ungodly. For scarcely for a righteous man will one die, yet perhaps for a good man someone would even dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love towards us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Very close to what you just read there, and probably what's the most famous passage in the scriptures, John chapter 3, verse 16, goes back to what I just read a few moments ago there in the book of 1 John chapter 4, verse 19. We love him because he first loved us. Well, this is how he demonstrated his love for us.
Right. So the question has to be asked, how do we demonstrate our love for him? And and the scripture tells us that. Let's look at 1 John chapter 5. 1 John chapter 5 and verse 3. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous. Stop thinking, but tell me one commandment that God has given us that's bad for us.
You're not going to find it.
You're not going to find it. Telling us to love one another, that's good for us. Telling us to be kind to people, that's good for us. Telling us not to murder, not to steal, that's good for us. So when we look at this, for this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous. So if we love God, we keep his commandments.
Right. And that is what it's showing there in that verse. Love is equated. Think of like setting up a little simple math equation. You got love on one side, and you have the equals sign. It's just what in the middle there. And then you have commandments. If you want to love God, there is something that you must do. It's not something you just say, is the point. It's something that you do. It's the way that you live your life. Going back to the words of Jesus, we find that this is the case. Down in the book of John, John chapter 14 and verse 15, very, very short verse, but very simple yet so powerful. It says, if you love me, keep my commandments. Again, love being equated to keeping the commandments, or otherwise known as obedience. Jumping forward in the book of John to John chapter 15, we find down in verse 14, you are my friends if you do whatever I command you. So if you want to have a relationship with God, a relationship with Christ, it comes down to what you are willing to do. And that, according to the scriptures, is classified as what true love toward God is.
That was even true under the old Mosaical law. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 6. Deuteronomy chapter 6. And let's look at verses 4 through 9. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, with all thy soul, with all thy might. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart. Now listen to what he's telling them to do here in verse 7. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when you sit down in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thine hand, and thou shalt be for frontlets between thine eyes, and thou shalt write them on the post of thy house and on thy gates. Now, what's he telling us there? We need to dedicate our life, and I know we have to go make a living and everything, but everything we do needs to be towards glorifying God,
Right.
and obeying his command.
And what that passage is pointing out is that in your life, God should be first.
That's right.
You see there what they were to do. They were supposed to speak of the things of God when they walked by the way, when they went to bed, essentially, when they got up in the morning, when they were sitting in their house. At every opportunity, they were to do that. But notice what is all contingent upon. Going back to verses 4 and 5 there, you see, especially in verse 5, you shall love the Lord your God. So if you have that proper love with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, you are going to do what verses 6 through 9 say.
And the other thing you got to consider here, what if you don't?
Right.
What's the consequences?
Right. That would be the question to ask. So we see, what is true love toward God? And these are just a couple of the passages that we could look at. We could look at many, many passages to consider the very same thing. We've seen why we should want to love God, 1 John 4:19, because he loved us first in those passages that we looked at. So how do we demonstrate our love toward God? Well, it's in what we do, by the things that we say, by the way that we live our lives. That is what true love towards God looks like. Secondly, what does true love look like according to the Bible? What is love? What does it look like? How is it portrayed? We see, according to the scriptures, that you must have a proper love toward your family.
Right.
We see that according to what God says, how it is portrayed in our lives. But even under that idea of what is obeying God, what is true love towards him, would be in how you treat others as well, including your family.
Right.
We see how important this relationship can be. In the book of Proverbs, chapter 17, down in verse 17, it says, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. What does that mean to you when you read that?
Well, it means to me the friends are there, but if you really got problems, your brother's there to help you. That the family, you've heard the saying, blood is thicker than water, or whatever, however it goes. I forget how it goes exactly, but what they're saying is the blood relation is very important to you. You will do things for your brother that you might not do for somebody else.
Right, and you can see that in all the movies that we watch, or these different shows. If someone's in a time of trouble, well, who are they looking to?
They look to their relatives,
Right.
to their brothers.
And so we see how important that is, even from the scriptures.
But there's another thing to consider here too. The true family love is sacrificial. Like I say, you'll do things for your brother that you might not do for somebody else. Look at Ephesians chapter 5:25. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25. And here it says, husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. Now that love there for the wife, I'm going to say some things here on that I think it applies to. Christ loved the church so much that he gave himself for it. I love my wife so much that if it come to me losing my life to protect her, I think I should. I would have, when my children were small, I would do, and I still would today. If it meant that they could be saved, I would give my life for them because they are my family. They're close to me. I remember one time when we was going out to Tennessee to see my sister and her family. We went down to Cottonwood Point, I think. No, it was Crothersville, and crossed the Mississippi on the ferry. And the boys wanted to get out and see it. They were both little, and I got out with them, and I held onto their hands so tight. I wasn't about to let them fall off into and it could have happened, but I was so concerned for them and loved them so much, I didn't want them to be lost.
Right. And you can see that just in the way that God has made us, the way that a parent's mind works. A good parent will do just about anything for their child. And we can see that in the world that we live in, even those who might not be members of the Lord's church. It's a moral thing that even points to the existence of God. You can see some information on this. But I'd like you to notice from the scriptures, what's an example of those who were not good parents, who did not have the proper love toward their family that they should have? In the book of 2 Kings chapter 17, down in verse 17, we see here, or rather verse 16 beginning, we'll just begin reading here for a little bit of the context. You can see how these people did not care about their family, especially their children. This is what love does not look like, according to the Bible. So they left all the commandments of the Lord and made for themselves a molded image and 2 calves, made a wooden image, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served Baal. Notice what verse 17 says. It's very sad. It says, they caused their sons and daughters to pass through the fire, practiced witchcraft and soothsaying, and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger. You can see in other passages in the scriptures what that meant, to cause your sons and your daughters to pass through the fire. That was a form of human child sacrifice towards some of those Canaanite gods.
Yeah.
That is what love does not look like.
Well, another thing love doesn't look like is allowing your children to misbehave and break the laws. I've said this several times. Loving your children means you discipline them. You discipline so you can love them, and so somebody else can love them.
Yep.
It's important that we understand that love also requires being I don't know what word do I use there, obeying the rules, I guess is what I want to say.
Yep.
So that it's important to understand that too. True love towards a spouse. What does the world think about this, about love for a spouse?
Well, I'll tell you what the world thinks. If you were just to turn on your TV, you can see, and this happened to me just a couple weeks ago, there was a show that I thought, well, this might look interesting. And about 10 minutes in, I had to turn it off because the world thinks that love is purely and only a physical relationship between two people. And that's what the world wants you to think. That's what the devil wants you to think, even, because if he can get you to think that, well, then he's already taken a step towards destroying what the home is supposed to be.
Right.
If he can get you to just look at that in just a purely physical way, well, number one, no one's going to be interested in a long-term relationship with someone in the area of marriage, which God had created. And that's what the world wants to sell you, because they think that it is appealing to everyone. And so that's... Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Nope, go ahead.
Well, the question you got to ask though, what does the Bible say? What does the Bible tell us that love towards your spouse is like?
Well, there is a place for a physical relationship.
Yes.
In marriage. There in the book of Hebrews, we'll just turn over there very quickly. Hebrews chapter 13, down in verse 4, it says, marriage is honorable among all, and the bed undefiled, but fornicators and adulterers God will judge. Now we see where that place is given for that, and that is in the area of marriage. Anything outside of that, we see from this verse that will be something that God will judge. There was a preacher I was watching, and it was some just community church. And there was this individual, again, it was some denomination, some different religious group out there, nothing close to what the church looks like according to what the scriptures say. But his sermon was on the topic of having a physical relationship with someone before marriage. And his premise was, It's just something that our culture has looked down upon for years, and according to the Bible is what he was saying, which is completely wrong from this verse that we just read, that there is nothing sinful or wrong about such. And what that is, once again, is what I see whenever I look at the scriptures and I look at the different ways, the devices of Satan. That is just another form of him trying to attack the church and ruin what the scriptures say about what love truly is according to the Bible in the area of a spouse or in the area of a family or in the area of even loving God. If he can start in the home by ruining what the picture of that looks like in the minds of the believers, he's gone a long way.
Yeah, that's the thing about thinking about love for your spouse. If it's just physical, all right, what happens when your spouse gets sick? I've had, I don't know how many surgeries, too, more than I want to think about, and my wife has taken care of me. She had back surgery last year, and I've helped her out. Uh, if it was just physical, when that happens, I'm done. I'm gone. I don't want to fool with it. But if you truly love someone, you will take care of them.
There's a very popular song that is out there that talks about that very thing. Well, there was this individual, they were married, that he fell into some deep health issues, and right away, the wife said, "Well, I can't live with this any longer." And so she left him. That's not what true love
That's
is,
not true
according to
love.
what the scriptures say, and even what common sense tells you. God created love towards a spouse to be a relationship between two people. That's the way it was even from the very beginning. There in the book of Genesis, chapter 2, down in verse 18, it says, "And the Lord God said, It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him." It's about a relationship between two people who care about one another, who are willing to demonstrate what we've discussed, true love toward family. And also, according to the scriptures, they should have, first of all, a true love towards God, a true sacrificial love, because if they have those things, what's going to be the result?
It's going to be a faithful marriage and a faithful Christian.
Right. And hopefully the proper environment for what God created the home to be.
Right. A marriage only works when both are trying to serve the other. It is on a higher plane and deeper level than what the world understands. Like I said earlier, we take care of one another, and yes, it's inconvenient sometimes. When your spouse is sick or needing something, and you have to give up something to help them. That is what it's. I heard a lesson here a while back out at Oak Grove. I went over there to their gospel meeting, and the message, one of the messages he put out, and it's true. When you have them marriage vows, what is that? What are you doing? You're saying, "Till death do you part." I had a guy come into my office one time when I was selling insurance. He just got married. He won one policy in his wife's name and one policy in his name. And the reason for that was that if you get divorced, back then, I don't know how it is now because I've been out of the insurance business a long time, but if you were freshly divorced, you had to go into the high risk company. So he wanted one in each name. So if it didn't work out, they'd both have insurance. But you know what? They were doing that. They were setting the stage for failure.
Yep.
And that's not what this fellow said out there at Oak Grove in that meeting. Says commitment. And it is when we made them vows to love one another and to care for one another until death do us part. That is commitment. And we need to commit to that. We also need to commit to God. And in committing to God makes it a whole lot easier to commit to each other.
Right. And even our family. And also, you take that one step further, our church family as well. I'd like to go back to the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 13. after we've looked at all these different things about what does love look like toward God, family, even a spouse, we can see, beginning in verse 4 again. I just want to read this for a reminder, and then one more passage before we close this evening. It says, love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. We've seen what that looks like in these other passages that we have considered this evening, and the rest of the scriptures, at least from what I understand, are in agreement with that very thing.
Yeah, let me say something here. I was talking to a young man this past weekend. T-Row and I went down to the Branson lectureships, and we was talking about marriage, and he said him and his wife had some kind of disagreement, and he said to her, he said, "Honey, I know you don't like me right now, but I love you. You know, there's times in your marriage that you don't like your spouse, but you still love them and you're still committed, and you know what's going on is going to change. You're going to still committed, and you know what's going on is going to change. You're going to get over it, and everything's going to be all right. But you got to have that love for one another, and it, like, again, if it was just sex, it won't last. It
Right.
has to be that commitment."
Mm-hmm. So we've seen, hopefully we've been able to answer this question, if you had such, or maybe just to solidify this in your mind. What do the scriptures say on this topic? A good topic to answer. What is love?
That concludes our program for tonight. We're glad you was with us, and hopefully that will help you in what some of the things in what love is. It's an important thing in our life. My wife and I'll be married 64 years this coming July, and that's commitment. She has put up with a lot. I'll give her that. But that's what love is, though, is staying together and taking care of one another. But since we're through that tonight, let me tell you what we have to offer to you. If you're interested in it, we have a book here called "Why I'm a Member of the Church of Christ" by Leroy Brownlow, and that is an excellent book. I have read it. We went over it here in a couple of years or a year or so ago. It really has all kinds of subjects. Reason 10, because it is undenominational. Just reason, no, that was 11. Reason 10, because it believes the Bible is a book to be rightly divided. It's that kind of a subject like that. If you would like that book, call us at 816-229-2021 and leave your name and phone number and address. We will probably call you back to confirm the address to be sure that we get it right, but we will mail this book out to you for absolutely no cost to you, and it is worth reading. If you're interested in a correspondence course, we have one here, Search for Truth, and there again, it won't cost you anything. We mail it out to you with a return envelope with a stamp on it. You fill it out and send it back to us. We look at it and correct. If there's anything need to be corrected, we do it. We send you that back plus the next lesson. Again, at no cost to you, and it'll take you probably 45 minutes to fill it out. But it's a good lesson. Lesson 1: Is there a God? If so, who is God? Is a day of judgment coming? That's the kind of questions it answers. Now we can do that as a correspondence course or as a in-home study. We have another one here we call Back to the Bible. There's 3 lessons in it, but they don't have to be. You don't have to finish every lesson in the one setting. But we use that one primarily for in-home or in-person studies. If you'd like to have that, give us a call at 816-229-2021, and we would be more than happy to study with you. And if there's any way that we can encourage you, and if you need have any questions, don't hesitate to call in, or on when we're on this is a call in program. If you want to call in, we will try to answer. Well, let me put it this way: we will answer your question with a biblical answer. We're not going to give you "I think." So anyway, we have these things to offer. If you'd like to have any of them, give us a call at 816-229-2021. Leave your name and address, and and phone number, and we will confirm your address before we send it. We appreciate you being with us tonight, and good night.
Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord.